Greetings, fellow travelers. This is my podcast, Not Super, but Human. My name's Will, and I'll be your guide. Every hero's journey begins with a single moment. That moment takes place in the hero's normal, everyday world, like we discussed last week, the world you know. That moment clashes with what the hero has been experiencing in their day to day life. It's completely different. It disrupts the normal rhythm of events for them. It's like a colorful splash of paint hitting a white canvas. Now, at the time, the hero may not understand what it means. It may feel uncomfortable. It may also feel right, despite that feeling of discomfort, because the normal everyday world that the hero's been living in has not been where they want to be. Now, this moment that acts as this call to adventure in our day to day lives can be a great many different things. Start of a new relationship, loss of an old one, losing a job, um, a conversation that might have maybe struck a chord that hasn't been struck in a while, moment of clarity in an otherwise unclear world. The call to adventure is the second stage of the hero's journey, as I'll be discussing it on this podcast. And so essentially, the call to adventure serves as the middle ground, stage wise, between the normal everyday world and the hero taking up their journey. If the world you know, the ordinary world, is the reason for the hero's journey, the why. The call to adventure is the catalyst that shakes the hero out of the existence that they've known. And this call to adventure serves to show the hero that there's more to life than they've presently been exposed to. This call to adventure may occur suddenly and unexpectedly. And due to this, the hero may miss it or not pay attention to it. In our lives, moments are fleeting. We may experience various calls to adventure, moments that could serve to show us that there's more to life than we're currently living, but we don't give it the space that it deserves. And not giving it the space, it won't act as the catalyst that pulls us out of the everyday world out into the adventure that could eventually bring us to the ideal versions of ourselves. One of the things that makes it difficult is we seek out meaning, and there is inherently meaning in the call to adventure. With that, we've talked about subjective meaning. You know, you discover meaning, and that's meaningful to you, and it may not have the same meaning to anyone else. And so, with the call to adventure, it's up to you to assign meaning to it, to these moments that could serve as this call. And so, giving some sense of meaning to it, we can work to understand it, and giving that meaning to it, we can identify why we are wanting that to be the call to adventure that pulls us out of the monotony or boredom or the crisis of the world we've been living in. Now, as I said, this call to adventure can be a great many things for you, and it could be some where you accept openly or you're openly open to the idea that it is your call to adventure, or it might be that moment where hey, this can't be. And with the call to adventure, the largest adventures can be due to the smallest events. I've always said that, my life as I know it started because of a job poster 14 years ago now. And it was this job poster I saw, and it was, come work for the YMCA of the Rockies. And so at the time I was living in Washington State, and yeah, I needed an adventure in my life, and I wasn't getting it. And I know I saw this job poster, and the individuals on it were out hiking, and it looked like an adventure. And I assigned a sense of meaning to this encounter with this poster, of all things, and like I said, the smallest moments. And because of this, I ended up working at the YMCA of the Rockies 3 summers in a row, had the time of my life there. And because of that, I ended up going to school in Colorado, ended up moving to Minnesota, um, then, everything that's transpired up to this point to have me doing this now. It's that job poster was incredibly significant to my life. At that time, it was a call to adventure on a previous hero's journey for me, and I identify it as a fixed point in my life. I think I've gotten that idea from Doctor Who, like like points in the timeline where it has to happen that way, otherwise everything is all mixed, everything is all jumbled, and it's not right. That Encountering that job poster was one of my fixed points in life because if I hadn't come across it, I may never have learned about the YMCA of the Rockies, and I may not even be here right now, and who knows where my life would have gone. It would have taken a completely different path, but because of it, I'm here now. All because I assigned a certain amount of meaning to it, and I did have an adventure because I accepted that call. And so I give this example just to demonstrate that this call to adventure or anything we assign meaning to can be something that may seem meaningless to someone else. And that's the beauty of subjective meaning. And when it comes to the call to adventure, there are a great many reasons that someone might ignore that call: fear, doubt, uncertainty, not knowing what lies beyond the veil or beyond the world that they're familiar with. And this uncertainty can really hold us back in a way. And like I said, we've all ignored or refused calls to adventure in the past. And I know something I'll be talking about with Andrew during our shared segment is the reluctant hero is also someone that might be forced onto their journey. So, you have the call to adventure, and then you have the hero that may either encounter the barriers, that first obstacle on their own, or they're essentially hurled over it by another force. And, it's okay to acknowledge if that's the case because so many great tales regarding heroes start with that reluctant hero being pushed out into the adventure that they didn't think they were quite ready for. And then an incredible story unfolds. I think, an example of that being How to Train Your Dragon. Love that movie. One of my all-time favorite movies. And, it picks up with the dragons and the Vikings at war with each other, and there's hatred and fear on both sides. And you have Hiccup, the least Viking that ever did Viking, uh, desperate to be one of them and do his part in the fight against the dragons and shoots down this Night Fury, and no one believes him. And he's like, I'm going to prove it. So he goes out to find it, and he does. And he finds that Night Fury in the contraption that he created and fired at it. And in that moment, he had his chance. And, I'll give a spoiler alert, I guess, because it's this movie. The original was a while ago, but the more recent version, the live action version, came out more recently. So, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie, if you're hoping to see the movie, you've been warned. So, Hiccup carries this knife up and he's like, all right, I'm gonna slay this dragon, and he's going to get his first dragon kill. And he, he tries to pump himself up. I'm a Viking, and he's gonna do it. But then he looks into, you know, that dragon's eyes and see, like, as he says, it was just afraid as he was. And he sees essentially his own reflection back at him, sees himself in that dragon, and cuts the rope to let the dragon free. And that was Hiccup's call to adventure, finding that sense of compassion and connectedness with what should have been an enemy to him. And that act led to an enduring friendship and an incredible bond, and led them on incredible adventures, all because he cut that rope. Now, for you as the everyday hero, what this call to adventure may look like just a moment that's out of place. It could be something that you're incredibly drawn to, or something that makes you uncomfortable yet piques your interest. It really could be anything. And, you know, it- like I pointed out, it could be something relatively small, could be large. It could be seeking out a new career, could be, like I said, navigating the loss of an old relationship. It could be an invitation to go and have an experience. There really are no limits to what this call adventure can be, because it's all about the adventure that you want to have in your life as that everyday hero. And it's about being open to these opportunities and being open to change. Considering this, Prochaska's stages of change, if the ordinary world, the world is considered to be the pre-contemplation stage of change, before you are aware that change was really something you craved, or change was necessary in your life. The call to adventure acts as um, that contemplation piece. So if the world was pre-contemplation, the call to adventure is contemplation, and you're starting to think life can be different. Life can be a little better. How can it be better? How can I get there? And so the call to adventure, like I said, is that catalyst. And for you, it can be that catalyst to get you thinking about what lies beyond for you. 'Cause change is always going to be inevitable, but it becomes about what change will you be in control of through taking up your own personal hero's journey. All right, Andrew, welcome back to Not Super But Human.
Thanks for having me again, Will.
Yeah. So this week, I am talking about the call to adventure, the subtle calling, or quite overt calling, depending on what it is. enticing our hero to their adventure. And so I wanted to talk to you about your work again and see what that looks like with the clients you work with.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different reasons people come into therapy. A lot of times it's symptoms causing problems in their life, usually with relationships, but also with just functioning and doing day-to-day things. So, this can actually overlap a lot with work, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be that they can't do the work. It could be it just makes it really hard for them.
Okay. So tell me some more ways that you see the call to adventure in the work that you do.
So I would say anger is a pretty good example.
Hmm.
People can, because that impacts a ton of areas of the person's life, the most in relationships.
Yeah.
I would say a good example of that is someone who is having difficulty just having regular conversations with like their significant other,
Hmm.
for example, and they can't, they're really reactive. They
Hmm.
can't respond and have like a intimate conversation
Right.
without them either yelling or throwing things or whatever it happens to be.
Hmm.
And they don't know how to address that, right? Like
Hmm.
there's the treatment of anger management, but there's also just finding out what's really going on.
Hmm.
If it's like, a previous experience in childhood
Hmm.
or a previous relationship that was really, you know,
Hmm.
abusive or something like that.
So let me ask you this. So if the anger management piece is the world that they know, that the world they live in currently, they struggle with that emotional regulation
Right.
piece. With the call to adventure being something that really disrupts that everyday world for them, what disrupts it to the point that they feel that they need to actually go to treatment for that anger management?
I would say most commonly it's their closest relationships. So it's either immediate family or their significant other. And not being able to have a conversation with them to, support the relationship or
Hmm.
keep the relationship healthy,
Hmm.
um, makes them unhappy generally. And, no one's going to be happy if they can't have a
Hmm.
healthy conversation with someone.
In these situations, is there threats of losing the relationship if they don't
Very,
manage their anger?
yes, very commonly. There's especially if like they sometimes get physical or if they throw things or um, even just yelling, like, because some people have,
Hmm.
trauma history, right? Where they
Right.
can't, that's not something they can live with. And
Hmm.
so, um, it's a significant impact on the person. And it can be other family members too, like a
Hmm.
parent or a sibling or kids,
Hmm.
Um, I, I would say kids especially is a big one because parents don't want to inflict that emotional
Hmm.
harm on their kids.
And what would be the catalyst for them realizing that?
Probably like either the first time or if it's happened a couple of times where they yell at their kid and their kid starts crying.
Hmm.
I'd say that's a pretty significant one. Or like, yeah, if it's happened multiple times, I think even the first time the parent will probably recognize it. But if it happens more than once, then the parent is
Hmm.
probably like, this is a problem. I don't want the kid to grow up this way. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What are some ways that you see the call to adventure in substance use treatment?
I would say there's like work problems
Hmm.
is very common,
Okay.
or they getting in trouble with the law, like they get a charge for something or a DWI or a possession charge or
Hmm.
something like that. And they maybe didn't have anything happen before that. It's
Hmm.
maybe their first charge, and
Okay.
then they're like, oh well, crap, maybe this really is a problem. Like I've
Hmm.
never been in trouble with the law before, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that instance of getting into trouble for what they've been doing, either the
Right.
drinking or the substance use, being
Hmm.
caught driving, being caught with the substance.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say especially like DWIs, especially because they, you know, oftentimes the person will at least have their license suspended pretty usually. And if it's happened multiple times, it can be like revoked. So they have to go through a big chain of um things that they have to
Jump through a
do.
lot of
The
hoops.
yes, they have to go
Yeah.
through a lot of hoops to get it reinstated. And I've worked with people where if it happens enough times, it's permanently revoked and they can never drive again.
Mhm.
And so it's and sometimes they need to hear that if it's happened a couple times.
So, in considering the call to adventure and the work that you do, what are some or what's an example that you may use?
I think one good example that's a parallel and you can really apply it in a pretty straightforward way is Venom because it's an alien, but it's physically inside of his body, right? When he binds with it. And so in the same way, anger is internal, right? Until we make it external. And so it's that internal turmoil, right? And so with Venom, at first, Venom is in control and causing carnage. Ha ha ha. And and he can't manage that, right? He doesn't want that happening because of what's inside of him. And so as you go through the series, especially in the first movie, he has to like work with him and like teach him how to not be this dangerous thing that causes all this damage and hurts people and kills people, right? And in the same way with anger, you can't just leave it there and let it cause the problems, right? It will literally eat away inside of you. And Venom does the same thing, right? When they're not in sync, it damages his body, right? And so that parallel is there too. And the working with anger is like there's anger management, but part of it is really just coming to terms with the fact that anger is your body's way of dealing with emotions that it finds uncomfortable, like hurt or pain or confusion. And it's like figuring out how to get through that.
So, part of the call to adventure would be acknowledging that these underlying emotions exist,
Right.
to some capacity.
Yes.
That the anger is not always just the anger, but there may be these other hurt, disappointment, betrayal. It's all these different other different emotions that may also be driving the anger. Like the acknowledgement of that could be the call to adventure.
Right. Yeah, because like you can even parallel that to how Venom is, right, in the movie. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's an alien, right? But he learns from Eddie that he can do things differently and that he can function in a different way and be productive or do positive things, at least anyway, being an anti-hero.
Earlier in the episode, I also discussed the reluctant hero. The hero that, when they receive a call to adventure, sorry, either they're not entirely ready for it yet, or they're resistant to it entirely, or they may not fully understand what the call means. Considering this, what are some examples of the reluctant hero you see in the work that you do?
I would say probably the most common by a pretty wide margin is probation. Individuals who either as part of like their conditions of probation or, the conditions usually say to like follow the directive of, the probation agent. The agent might be requesting that they, either get an assessment or go to therapy. Or substance use treatment very commonly, right? Like that also can be court ordered and is pretty often. And then I would say probably second is Child Protective Services.
Okay.
That's also very common. And that can, be either parent or, and then it kind of gets into spouses or family members telling the person that they have to go. Yeah.
Yeah, so the reluctant hero in these scenarios is more the individual that's mandated
Right.
for substance use treatment. Not really a choice all their own. Courts, probation, parole, families pushing them to do it for various reasons. But whatever that is, it's just they're not entirely certain.
Right.
How do you know when they're more reluctant, even if they're not telling you they're reluctant?
I would say you can kind of tell by body language when you're, especially if you're doing an assessment, whether they're being fully honest with you or not, and just kind of how they answer the questions. That's everyone answers differently. Like everyone has a different personality, but most commonly, if they're giving you one word answers, that's usually a sign that they don't want to give you much information, right?
Okay.
And so, like, I asked someone, maybe like, what is the extent that you use the substance? And they're like, they just say once a week, and they don't give me anything else. Like,
How much do you use? Varying amounts. Well, how much do you define varying amounts? It's every so often. Okay, define every so often. Sometimes I use a varying amount to a certain degree in certain ways.
yes.
Oh,
Yeah, like, can you give me a number? Between this, and it's like a huge range. Yeah. Like between a bowl and a bag. Like,
sometimes I drink once a week, but during really tough times, it's twice a week. But during the tougher times, it's twice a day, 8 beers in a day, every day.
yep. And then
What-
if it gets worse, it's a liter.
but but usually just once a day
Yeah,
or once a week.
right.
Um, I shouldn't joke too much about this, but it is true. It's just the trying to withhold the information and
Mhm.
the I don't know, varying amounts. Sometimes I use this amount, and well, how much is this amount? I don't know. Hard to keep track.
Right.
They don't want to tell.
Right. Like,
They're reluctant.
right. Like, I just need a number to put in the box, please.
Right. Just let me do my job. Yeah, and I do want to say too, just like with the hero's journey, uh, even the bravest of heroes are reluctant to their journey at first, and I think an important distinction that I've always made is, there's this preconception that individuals that are mandated for treatment aren't going to be successful in
Mhm.
treatment.
Right.
And I've just found that to be incredibly untrue.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my most successful clients were initially mandated for treatment. They were entered because they were pushed to by probation or the courts, or entered into drug court because of what was going on in their lives. But then over time something changed, and then they accept that journey, and then they do become very successful. So so just like with the hero's journey, the reluctant hero, even though they're kind of, instead of running up to that barrier, they're hurled over it.
Mhm.
And same's true when it comes to substance use treatment. They can find that will to take on the journey along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, one of my favorite things to say, and this helps a lot of people when they're kind of on that fence
Mhm.
and think maybe, maybe not. I say, it doesn't matter what brought you here. What matters is what you get from being here, what you
Mhm.
put into it, right? Like,
Right.
what you put in is what you get out, right? Of treatment, as they say, and it's not a cliche for a reason. It's very true.
Mhm.
If you don't contribute anything to the groups, you're not going to get anything from the group
Mhm.
that you can personalize and use yourself, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Andrew. Well, thanks again for joining me as we discuss the call to adventure and the reluctant hero.
Thanks for having me.
Say the thing.
Not super, but human.
Thank you.
One of the important parts of this episode today is that a significant part about the call to adventure has to do with meaning. And with that, you also need to remember you discover meaning through your experiences, and you decide what that meaning is. If you believe something to be meaningful, it is. You simply need to determine why it's meaningful to you. And something too to consider is our attitude towards our experiences shapes our meaning as well. And so learning from the everyday world that we've been in, the world and then knowing how our experiences will then serve us on that hero's journey
through understanding this call to adventure. And two, the second point to remember here is call to adventure can be anything, and it can be subtle, and it may be fleeting, and it may be something you may miss entirely if you're not paying attention. But the point is, it's there for you to discover. Much like Hiccup, simply need to cut the rope.